This time, the order wasn't food. The order was me. If you think your closed door protects you, let me tell you what I saw under my doorstep in the middle of the night. My husband works for a large distribution chain and delivers to every place in the middle of the nowhere you can think of. He has many stories to tell, but this is one of the scariest. He had to travel to a pub in the middle of nowhere, which was nestled off some back road near the edge of the moors. It was in a tiny little village with one road in and out, and just had a shop, cafe, and gift shop. As he entered the pub, which must have been at least 17th century, he immediately fell off. He said the air seemed really thick, and you had a constant feeling of being watched. The landlord was really friendly, but seemed edgy and overly pleased to see an extra person on his premises. After the delivery, my husband requested to use the facilities. The landlord pointed to the basement door, and my husband went white. He really didn't like the idea of having to go down to a basement of a creepy pub, but he was too desperate to wait for his next delivery. There was very little light in the stairwell, and every step he took he felt he was getting nearer and nearer to something quite evil. He was expecting someone or something to come out of nowhere at any time, and he was certain he could hear a shuffling sound coming from somewhere. He finished what he was doing and was washing his hands, and then he heard footsteps. Someone was coming down the stairs towards the bathroom at full force. My husband presumed it was the landlord and stared at the door, expecting him to make an entrance. Nothing. He could see the handle move back and forth, but nobody entered. Thinking it was a prank or some drunk local, he flung the door wide open. There was nobody there. He looked around, but there was only a locked door one side and the stairs to the left. He ran up the stairs, and the landlord was serving the only obvious customer. My husband asked if anyone had been down there, and he replied as quick as anything with "that will be the ghost." My husband didn't believe in ghosts at the time, but the landlord told him that customers have reported being pushed or hit as they went down the stairs, being locked in the bathroom, and then suddenly the door opened wide, and hearing footsteps behind them when nobody was there. My husband left the pub and thought nothing of it till he mentioned it to his sister. His sister is a huge fan of all these ghost investigation shows, and she told him that the pub in question had featured on one of the shows. It used to be some sort of judgment courthouse where people were convicted of crimes and then hung there. It was one of those Florida nights where the sky feels heavy, low, and suffocating. A night so humid you feel like you're breathing water instead of air. It was nearing 1 a.m. The streets in my neighborhood had turned into dark tunnels, flanked by ancient live oaks whose mossy branches hung down like tattered spiderwebs. My name is Sarah. I've been a delivery driver for 2 years now. In this job, you see people's true faces in the dead of night. You see the loneliness, the hunger, and sometimes things you were never meant to see. The shift was quiet, the money was slow, until my phone illuminated the dark cabin of my car with that familiar ding. An order from Wawa. The drop-off was only 5 minutes away, in a secluded area known for its old, weathered wooden estates. I opened the GPS and started driving. The road seemed to narrow with every mile. When I reached the address, I pulled up in front of a massive structure. It wasn't just a house. It was an old apartment complex, seemingly abandoned or crudely converted into a single-family home. The place was dead. Not a single light was on. Not even a faint glow behind the window screens. The silence was so heavy that the screech of my brakes sounded like a literal scream in my ears. The delivery note read, "Leave the order at the bottom door." I stepped out, and a sudden chill ran down my spine. The air felt unnaturally cold in that specific spot. I walked with the food bag, each step on the dry grass sounding like a loud, rhythmic crunch. I set the food down, took the delivery photo, and turned to head back. At that exact second, I felt a sudden cold draft on my neck, as if someone was standing right behind me, breathing. I spun around. Nothing. But I noticed the dilapidated bottom door had a peephole, and for a heartbeat, I felt someone was watching me through it, someone who didn't blink. I got back into my car, cranked the engine, and tried to steady my racing heart. Sarah, you're exhausted, I whispered to myself. Fatigue is making you see things. I began to pull away, watching the massive silhouette of the house disappear in my rearview mirror, drowning in the shadows of the oaks. Less than 2 minutes later, ding. I checked the app, expecting a long-distance order to take me far from that place. My fingers froze on the steering wheel. Taco Bell. Same address. The same massive house I had left 60 seconds ago. Impossible, I muttered. The Wawa and Taco Bell were barely 12 meters apart on the main road, literally side by side. Why would any sane person pay double delivery fees for two restaurants right next to each other at the same time? Logic said they just forgot something, but my gut was screaming. This was a setup. This time, the note was in all caps. Do not leave food at the bottom. Come to the top floor. Side door to the stairs is open. Double tip. I went back. As I turned onto the side street leading to the house, I slammed on my brakes. The house that had been a void of darkness 2 minutes ago was now ablaze with light. Every window emitted a pale, sickly white glow. But strangely, the curtains were drawn tight. So tight you couldn't see a silhouette behind them. The lights were on, but the house still felt dead. I parked in the same spot, but this time I didn't want to get out. I stared at the stairs, dilapidated wooden steps leading to the upper floor, long and exposed. I grabbed the Taco Bell bag and began to walk. The silence was unnatural. Even the crickets had gone mute, as if nature itself was holding its breath to watch what would happen. I reached the side door. It was indeed ajar, small, dark invitation. I placed my foot on the first step. Creak. The sound was deafening, echoing through the trees. I climbed step after step. With every movement, I felt like the staircase was shifting beneath me, as if someone was climbing on the opposite side, perfectly timing their steps with mine to remain unheard. I reached the landing. The door was old wood, painted a faded dark red, with a small gap at the bottom. Through that gap, I saw the living room. A TV was on, but it was just white noise, static flickering on the screen with a low hum. Next to the TV was a single lit candle, its flame shivering as if someone's breath was nearby. I pulled out my phone to text the customer. The moment I hit send, I heard a vibration. Beep. Bees easy, coming from inside. I peered through the crack. There, on a wooden table right by the door, was a phone. It was lit up with my name and photo, but no hand reached for it. No one moved. The phone just vibrated in a lethal silence. The person who ordered didn't want the food. They wanted me to confirm they were inside so I would open the door. I stood there frozen. My hand holding the bag was shaking so hard the paper began to rustle. I was so close I could smell the place. A scent of damp earth mixed with something else like burnt sulfur. Just drop the food, Sarah, I breathed. Take the photo and run. I crouched down slowly, trying not to let the wood groan under my weight. I set the bag in front of the door. As I framed the camera shot, the silence was shattered. From right behind the door, centimeters from my face, I heard a heavy breath. Not the breath of someone sleeping, the breath of someone who had been holding it, waiting for this exact moment. Then a raspy, gravelly male whisper, a voice that sounded like it hadn't been used in years, hissed with a terrifying command. Hurry! She's leaving now. Don't let her get away. Those words were poison. They didn't mean me. He was talking to someone else in the house. In a flash, I saw the game. The first order was to see what I looked like. The second was to lure me up the stairs while someone else cut me off from behind or waited at the bottom. I shoved my phone into my pocket and, without thinking, cleared the stairs in a single leap. I wasn't running. I was flying in pure terror. Crack, thud, the wood shrieked under my boots. Behind me, I heard the door slam open and the sound of heavy, thundering footsteps beginning to descend after me. I hit the ground, my heel twisted, and I slid on the wet grass. My heart was pounding so hard it physically pained my chest. I scrambled up and lunged for the car. I heard the sound of heavy panting right behind me. I dove inside, slamming the locks just as a massive thud hit my back window. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely fit the key into the ignition. The engine struggled to turn over, as if the car itself was paralyzed by fear. Hemmed in by the oaks and the darkness, I had to pull a desperate three-point turn. As I swung the car around, my high beams swept across the face of the building. I saw a sight I will never forget. In the upstairs window, the curtains were now wide open. Two men, massive, dressed in dark clothing, stood perfectly still, staring down at me. One held the vibrating phone. The other had his hand on the frame, watching my movements with cold, predatory indifference. I looked down toward the bottom door. A third man was stepping out, half hidden in the shadows, clutching something long and metallic. A pipe? A club? He had been the one waiting to intercept me if I had fled through the ground floor. I floored the gas. The tires screeched, burning rubber, and I tore through the trees, blinded to everything but the GPS path out of that woods. I didn't feel safe until I hit the highway and saw the humdrum glow of regular streetlights. With trembling hands, I called support. The agent was calm at first, but when I gave her the address, she went dead silent. Then her voice shifted. "Sarah, this house has been flagged for suspicious activity for a year, but there was never enough evidence to delist it. I'm blocking this address permanently and patching you through to the police." When I got home, I sat in my car for an hour, unable to move. I kept checking the mirrors, terrified I'd see a dark car or those massive silhouettes behind me. To this day, when I get an order for a wooded area or an old-style house, my entire body tremors. And to this day, I ask myself, if I had stepped into that living room to deliver the food to the woman whose phone was vibrating, what would have happened to me? And who would have picked up the next order? In rural Georgia, the night isn't just a time of day. It's a living entity. The forests here are so dense they swallow light whole. The side roads are nothing more than narrow veins cutting through towering pines, trees that make you feel like you're in a prison without walls. My name is Alex, and I deliver for Marco's Pizza. Out here in the sticks, this job is an uncalculated gamble, mostly because you end up in places where even the GPS is afraid to go. I had been on shift for about an hour, my body was aching, and I was ready to call in night. That's when the notification popped up. A late night order. I looked at the address. Old Pine Road. My stomach did a slow flip. That road was notorious. Buried deep in the timber where the houses are so far apart that every neighbor lives in their own isolated world. I didn't know it then, but this was about to be the longest trip of my life. I headed out, my headlights the only thing cutting through the absolute, suffocating pitch black. The road transitioned from asphalt to gravel and dirt, the sound of the tires crunching beneath me unnervingly loud in the dead silence. I finally reached the address. The driveway was massive, a long, dirt path leading to an old structure hidden behind a wall of trees. I parked, grabbed the pizza boxes, my pen, and the receipt. The air was biting, and the wind was eerily still. As I walked toward the front door, I felt that unmistakable prickle on the back of my neck, the sensation of eyes watching from the tree line. Before I could reach the porch, I heard movement from behind the house, the sound of fast, heavy footsteps on dry leaves. I froze, snapping my gaze toward the sound. A woman emerged from the shadows. She was gaunt, her face skeletal and pale in the spill of my headlights. She spoke in a strange, hollow tone. "Hello, we're back here in the garage. Come here." I followed her, though every instinct I had told me to run. We walked to the side garage, but I stopped dead at the threshold. I wasn't going to take a single step inside. I peered into the space, and the scene looked like it was ripped straight out of a backwoods horror film. Two men, massive and imposing, sat in weathered recliners. They were decked out in full military camouflage. The walls were plastered with Confederate flags and the mounted heads of dead deer, their glass eyes staring at me with a fixed, vacant gaze. The air inside smelled of stale blood and motor oil. Now, you have to understand, I'm a trans man. I've been on hormones for months, and I do my best to pass as male. But these three were adamant. They kept calling me ma'am and miss, their voices dripping with a mocking, challenging undertone. It was as if they knew my secret and were using it to sharpen the tension. The silence that followed every word they spoke was heavy, suffocating. Suddenly, one of the large men gestured toward the back of the dark garage. His voice was a low, gravelly rumble. "Come on in, Mississippi, don't stand out there in the cold. Come inside to get your payment." I kept my voice as steady as possible. "I'm sorry, sir. Company policy strictly forbids us from entering homes or garages. I can finish the transaction right here at the edge." He ignored me completely. Suddenly, the woman and the other man began to chant the same phrase in unison, their voices rising in volume and intensity. "Come in. Why are you so afraid? Just come inside for a minute." In that moment, I saw one of them shift his hand toward something hidden beneath his chair. Terror paralyzed me for a second, but I found my voice. I refused a third time, firmly. I set the pizza on an old table by the entrance and handed them the receipt. They took the food and tossed me a $3 tip, laughing a cold, mirthless laugh as I backed away. I didn't turn my back on them. I retreated to my car, eyes locked on the garage, until I was safely behind my locked doors. I slammed the car into gear and floored it, catching one last glimpse of them in the rearview mirror. All three were standing at the mouth of the garage, perfectly still, watching me until the trees swallowed them whole. To this day, whenever I have to drive down that road, a chill settles deep in my bones. That house wasn't just a customer ordering pizza. It was a trap waiting for someone to make the mistake of stepping inside. $3 was the price of my survival that night, but the memory is burned into my mind. Georgia is beautiful, but its forest hides secrets, and sometimes those secrets are sitting in a garage just waiting for you to walk in. In our profession as delivery drivers, we don't just transport food. We cross through portals into worlds that ordinary people never know exist. There are places that, the moment their name flashes on your phone screen, cause your stomach to tighten, as if your phone isn't asking you to deliver a meal, but is commanding you to go to hell. That night, the address was the old Riviera Hotel. For those who don't know it, it isn't a hotel in any real sense. It's a human dumpster drowning in filth. It's a sanctuary for those fresh out of prison with hearts full of malice, for the poison peddlers who sell death in small plastic baggies, and for those who have fallen off the edge of society and found nowhere else to take them in but these rooms that reek of cheap disinfectant mixed with the stench of stale cigarettes. The weather was cold, a thin drizzle slapping against my car windows, and the streets surrounding the hotel were empty, save for a few suspicious figures watching everyone who entered and exited. I parked my car and gripped the pizza box, the only warm thing in this cold, desolate place. I climbed the stairs, the steps groaning under my feet. The hallways were suffocatingly narrow, and the yellow lighting overhead flickered and buzzed with a rhythmic hum, as if it were in its final death throes. I reached the second floor. The corridor was unnervingly long, the carpet covered in stains you wouldn't want to know the origin of. My eyes searched for room 213. The strange thing about these hotels is that the doors are usually locked with 7 deadbolts out of sheer fear, but when I reached room 213, I froze in my tracks. The door was ajar, open just a few centimeters. A strange silence reigned, a heavy silence that didn't resemble the silence of sleep. I knocked lightly, and the door swung open a bit further. I called out, "Marco's Pizza? Delivery." No response. I knocked a second time, harder, and the door pushed back to reveal a scene that will never leave my memory. The room was a shambles. Empty liquor bottles and clothes strewn everywhere. And on the bed, there was a man lying on his back, fully dressed, even down to his shoes. He didn't move an inch. At first, I thought of the logical explanation. He's probably passed out drunk. I shouted the name written on the receipt at the top of my lungs. But the man remained as he was, a statue of flesh and blood in the middle of that filthy room. As I stood there in a trance, torn between leaving the pizza and running or going in to check on the man, the door opposite suddenly swung open. Another man stepped out. His features were sharp, his eyes sunken and surrounded by darkness, as if he hadn't slept in days. He looked at me, then peered into the room and said in a chillingly cold tone, "He's not answering you," I said, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. "No, he seems to be in a deep sleep." The man nodded and entered the room with an unnatural boldness. He approached the man on the bed and began to shake him violently, shouting in his ear, "Hey, wake up. Your dinner is here." But the man was like a piece of wood. In that moment, I noticed something. The chest of the man on the bed wasn't rising or falling. There was no breath. The other man looked at me and with absolute coldness said, "Call the police. I think he's passed away." No panic crossed his face. He didn't try to revive him. He spoke as if we had discovered the television was broken, not that a human life had ended. Within minutes, the quiet hallway turned into a crime scene. Police officers, paramedics, and the blinding flashes of forensic cameras. I stood there giving my statement, the police asking me, "Did you see anyone leave? Did you hear a sound?" I told them everything that happened and how the neighbor in the room opposite was the one who discovered the situation with me. The preliminary diagnosis was a heart attack. It seemed the man had health issues, or perhaps it was an overdose of some kind. As the paramedics were covering the body with a white sheet, that strange neighbor approached me once more. He looked at the pizza box I was still holding and said words that made the hair on my neck stand up. "Listen, give me that pizza. I'll pay for it." I stared at him in disbelief. The man he had been sitting with, or perhaps his friend, was being wheeled out in a black bag, and he was thinking about pizza. He said with a chill that would envy a morgue, "He doesn't need it anymore, and I'm hungry." "What's the total?" He pulled out his wallet, paid the full amount plus a tip, took the pizza, entered his room, and shut the door behind him. I went back to my car, but I couldn't move. Questions began to gnaw at my mind. Why did that man order pizza to his neighbor's room? If you think about it deeply, you find a diabolical explanation. Imagine with me, the two men were using something together, and suddenly, one of them died. The neighbor was terrified the body would be found in his room, or that he'd be linked to the death. So what did he do? He went back to his room and ordered a pizza in a deceased man's name for the deceased man's room. Why? So that a stranger, a delivery driver, would be the first witness to discover the body. It made the neighbor look like a good Samaritan who just happened to check in by chance. The pizza was the official report that the neighbor had planned with chilling intelligence and cold blood, just to remove himself from the equation entirely. He used my hunger for a shift in my job, to cover up something only he truly knows. To this day, I don't know the actual cause of death, but I know one thing. That pizza the neighbor bought was the coldest meal ever eaten in that hotel. A meal that tasted of death and deception. It happened at the height of the first lockdown, a time when the world had transformed into a vast prison with walls made of fear and bars forged from silence. In our quiet town, the streets looked like abandoned canvases. No children playing, no dogs barking. Only a cold wind whistling between the tightly packed houses. Back then, online shopping wasn't a luxury. It was a lifeline for a family like mine, unaccustomed to having strangers handle our food. That Monday was far from ordinary. The sky was choked with heavy, gray clouds, as if promising that something sinister was about to drop from the heavens. Order arriving between 6 o'clock and 7 p.m., the text on my mother's phone read. We waited behind the window, watching the empty road, when a massive white delivery van appeared in the distance. We felt a flicker of false relief. We didn't know that this relief was merely the first step into a trap. The van pulled up at our gate. The driver stepped out. At first glance, he looked perfectly normal, clad in the official company uniform with a cap pulled low, obscuring half his face. But as he took his first step onto our driveway, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The order was massive. Paper bags and cardboard boxes piled high in the back of the van. My mother and I began hauling the bags, but the load was heavy and the trek from the gate to the kitchen was grueling. With a smile that felt surgically precise, the driver said, "Looks like you'll be at this all night. Mind if I give you a hand?" I exchanged a look with my mother. In the era of the pandemic, letting a stranger inside was a sin, but exhaustion won. She nodded, and that was the fatal mistake that changed the course of our lives. The man entered our kitchen. His steps were heavy, placing the boxes with a slow, deliberate cadence on the marble countertop. My mother went back out to grab the last box from the van, leaving me alone with him in the cramped kitchen. That's when a mask slipped. He was no longer looking at the bags. He was looking at me. His eyes were narrow, scanning the details of our home as if searching for a weakness. In a low, monotonous voice, he asked, "Where's the father?" I froze. "Excuse me," I stammered, trying to play dumb. He repeated the question, his eyes now wandering toward the hallway leading to the bedrooms. "Your father. When does he get back? Do you even have a father in this house?" Answering with a sudden defensive instinct, I snapped, "He's at work. He'll be back in a few minutes. He always comes home early." He nodded slowly, as if my answer was merely a puzzle piece he had just slotted into place. My mother returned, thanked him formally, and he left with an eerie calmness. 40 minutes passed. The van was still there, parked at the corner of the street. Engine off, windows dark. Why hasn't he left? I asked my mother, peeking through the curtains. "Maybe he has another delivery in the neighborhood," she replied, trying to convince herself. Don't be so paranoid. But my heart was thumping like a drum. That van wasn't just a vehicle. It was a crouching beast waiting for the darkness to consume its prey. At 7:30 p.m., my father returned. His face was pale from a long day's work, but as soon as he walked in, he dropped a bombshell. "Did one of you leave the keys in the side shed lock? And was someone using the ladder?" The spoon fell from my mother's hand. "What ladder?" I screamed. "There's a wooden ladder leaning against the back fence leading to the shed roof," my father said. "And the shed is wide open." In that moment, fear turned into pure, unadulterated terror. I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Lock the doors. Now, that man was here. He was asking about you, Dad." My father didn't understand the details immediately, but the sheer panic in my voice was enough to send him sprinting to the front door to throw the iron bolt. We spent the next 2 hours in a state of maximum alert, armed with a heavy flashlight and a club. My father searched every corner. The walk-in closet, empty save for heavy coats. The attic, the dust of years was undisturbed. No strange footprints. The garden shed, the lock was smashed, but the interior was vacant. By 10:30 p.m., exhaustion began to set in. Maybe he ran off when he saw your car pull in, my father said. Try to de-escalate the tension. We began to convince ourselves the danger had passed, that the man was just a cowardly thief who fled. I went up to my room, locked the door, and tried to sleep. An hour later, I woke up to a rhythmic scratching sound. My cat, Luna, was standing by the door, clawing at the carpet with an uncharacteristic intensity, letting out low, muffled meows. I rubbed my eyes, squinting in the gloom. Pale moonlight filtered through the window. I was about to get up to move the cat when my entire body turned to stone. Beneath the crack of the door, where the dim light of the hallway bled through, there was a shadow that didn't move. It wasn't the shadow of a piece of furniture. It was the silhouette of two massive boots. The blood turned to ice in my veins. For a fleeting second, I hoped it was my father checking on me, but the shadow was too tall, and it was unnervingly still. There was no sound of breathing, only the silence of the grave. I rose slowly, walking toward the door with steps so silent a ghost wouldn't hear them. I placed my hand on a knob, my heart nearly bursting through my ribs. I yanked the door open, and there he was, the driver. He stood there, towering like a pillar of horror, his face devoid of expression, his eyes swallowed by the darkness. Before I could even form a scream, his rough hand, reeking of tobacco and cardboard, slammed over my mouth with crushing force. I felt the pressure of his fingers on my jaw, as if he were trying to stifle my soul, not just my voice. In that moment, a strength born of pure survival instinct surged through me. I clamped my teeth down on his palm with every ounce of resolve I possessed. I tasted the saltiness of blood in my mouth and heard his muffled groan. He let go for a split second. I let out a scream that shook the very foundations of the house. He's here. He's in my room. The man panicked. He hadn't expected resistance. He shoved me hard on a bed and bolted for the stairs with frantic speed. I heard my father burst out of his room screaming, followed by the violent crash of the back door as the man burst through it and vanished into the black of night. The police arrived 10 minutes later. They inspected the fence and found footprints in the backyard, along with blood on my carpet, his blood. But, as it often happens in real-life nightmares, it led to nothing. The van had been stolen, and the identity he used was a phantom. 2 months have passed, and to this day, I cannot sleep unless every light in the house is on. Every time I hear the rumble of a van engine in the street, or the scratching of a cat at my door, my heart stops for a beat. The man left the house, but he never left my head. I still wonder, if the cat hadn't scratched at the carpet, what was he planning to do as he stood behind my door in that dead silence?